were having a difficult time in their marriage. They decided to take a train journey across America. What Julie hadn't known was Jake, her husband, only organised the journey to organise a hitman to kill her on the train. Julie was sitting down reading a book, while Jake said he was going to get a drink in the train's bar. As Julie was reading, a man sat down next to her, introducing himself as Andy, and asked her for the time. Julie found it strange, knowing these days anyone should have the time when they have a phone. The man introduced himself to Julie. This was all part of Jake's plan. 15 minutes later, Jake had arrived, and as planned, he told her an old friend of hers was in the next carriage. He recognised me and was asking for her. Of course, there was no school friend. The plan was that the hitman pushed Julie out of the train door when she went to see what friend. Jake hoped she'd take the bait and smiled when she did. Julie walked towards the door. Jake would have loved to have watched it happen, but knew it would be too obvious. The hitman was wearing gloves and an aesthetic face, just in case there were cameras they missed scoping the train out a few days ago. Jake had planned to walk up to the next carriage in about 15 minutes to get clarification the job was done. He was about to walk into the next carriage when the man said, "Hi sir, nice journey, isn't it?" Jake smiled, knowing those were the exact words he was meant to say. Jake replied, "Is the job done?" The man said, "Well, I got to chat a lot with your wife. She seems a very nice lady," but most importantly, he was looking behind Jake's shoulder at this moment. Jake turned around to see what he was looking at, and with his shock, he saw Julie staring at him with hatred in her eyes. The man continued to speak. "More importantly, your wife. She seems to be a very sweet lady, and may I say, a very beautiful lady." Jake was dumbfounded and said in a confused tone, "What's going on here?" Julie spoke. "Let me explain. And this hitman here who goes by the name of Andy, which I call Andrew, is not just a regular hitman. We have been dating for the last 6 months. Wait, should I change that to we have been having an affair for the last 6 months?" And she gave a sinister smile. Jake didn't know what was happening. He spoke quietly so no other passengers could hear him. "What is happening here? How do ye know each other?" Andrew explained. "When you first made contact with me, did you not realize it was me who first made contact with you?" Jake still couldn't understand how a hitman he hired on the dark web could have been having an affair with his wife he ordered to kill before he even made contact. Jake said, "Wait a minute. You said you made contact with me first." Suddenly Andrew said, "Well, we told a tiny lie, but it's not about me making contact first." With that, Andrew pulled off his prosthetic mask, revealing the face of their marriage counsellor they had for the last 6 months. It was Andrew and Julie were having an affair, and because of Julie not trusting her husband, she checked his phone one time when he left it on the bed for 5 minutes while he shaved. Just as he left, she picked it up in order to not have to put in any code that she knew she wouldn't be able to guess. He'd just been on it, so she didn't have to put in any access code. She went through it and came across a text that said all the information and money needs to be transferred to this email address. I will have the job done once the money is sent through Bitcoin to this account. Julie had no idea what it was, but sent an email saying, I will send the money, but I need to know exactly what you're going to do. I need to know exactly every detail of what I'm paying for." Julie changed the real email, so no matter what email Jake sent would not get sent and would not be received by the hitman. But she changed it by adding a dot that was barely seen. But Julie kept contact and brought the hit forward, of course, with the real hitman thinking he was in contact with Jake. Julie had been on the train waiting for the hitman to arrive, and when he did, there were undercover police ready to arrest him as soon as he asked for the time. They waited until a guy with a prosthetic face of Jake clarified with the hitman did he finish the job. Then the undercover police moved in. The real Jake was shocked to learn that the hitman was arrested a week ago, and he was going to be arrested now. Julie looked at him and said, "You son of a bitch."
I was 13 years old and my parents were going away, but they still insisted that for some reason I still needed a babysitter. My parents told me it was my cousin who was coming to watch me. My cousin lived out of the state my whole life, so I had never seen him before. This would be my first time. I asked my parents about the type of person my cousin was. They said that he used to be a really bad kid, but then he changed his life around. My parents were ready to leave, but they were just waiting for my cousin to get there before they left, so they knew I was safe and that I was in good hands. My cousin still wasn't there, and if my parents didn't leave at that second, then they would miss the flight. My mom got a message, and my cousin said that he was running a little late and that he would be there shortly. My parents said to keep the door locked until he gets there. I smiled and waved bye to them as they left. Right after my parents had left, I hear a knock on the door, and it's my cousin who was babysitting me. He was a strange older man who did not look right, and he even smelled. His clothes were torn, and he was really weird. My parents didn't tell me about this, but it's my cousin and my parents trust him, so I know I'm safe. I noticed my cousin going through my parents' stuff in their room. Then he was in our basement looking through our stuff. I told my parents of the strange behavior my cousin was acting like, but they told me it's just been a while since we saw or talked to him and that he's okay. I didn't think too much of it. I asked my parents what he liked doing. They said he was extremely good at chess. I like chess. I wasn't really good at it, but I asked him if he wanted to play and we did. As we were playing, he was really bad at it. I destroyed him and I wasn't that good. I was texting my mom one day and she said that she wanted to see me, so I FaceTimed her. She sees my cousin in the background and her mouth drops. I asked her what's wrong and she tells me to go to my room. Then she tells me that the man wasn't my cousin. She didn't know who he was. She told me to try to get out of the house and that she and my dad would be coming straight home and that they would call the cops. The man tried opening the door and it was locked. He said sorry it has to end like this and started shaking the door handle. I was so scared, so I hid under my bed. The man broke open the door. He has a knife in his hand. He pulls me from under the bed and tells me that my parents are only rich because they stole his money and that they took advantage of him. He killed my cousin, took his identity, and now he was trying to kill all of us. And that he was going through my parents' basement and their stuff looking for extra money or jewelry. As he's about to stab me, I feel like my life is coming to an end. But all of a sudden, a cop tackles and arrests him. He is taken to jail and my parents arrive home. They are so happy that I am okay. I asked my parents about the man and they tell me that they never seen him in their lives. They were my parents, so I believed them and continued my life. I always wondered what would have happened if the police officer didn't tackle the man, and I wonder who was really telling the truth.
I work for a small newspaper company, and I usually just write about things happening in the community. One story though got me particularly interested, and it was about a woman who lived in Filth. Her neighbours had been complaining about odd foul smells coming from her house. It isn't the type of story that I usually do, but it was different, and that's what got me interested. When I got to her house, I could clearly see from the front of the house how filthy it all was. The thought of going inside started to become a regrettable decision. I mean, first encounters count, right? And I didn't mean to be so judgmental straight away, but looking at her house, it gave off the sort of impression that this was a person who didn't look after herself that much. I also talked with some of the locals, and what they told me about her didn't give off a good judgment of character. This woman was clearly out of touch with everything around her. At the same time, I wanted to know more about her, and me, being a nosy person, I couldn't help but wanting to know more about her. Clearly, something had happened in her life to make her live like this. I had already called her to make sure she was okay with me looking into her life, and she agreed to show me her way of life and to explain to me why she lives the way she does. The filth had a stench, and I was surprised that she hadn't died from any bacteria, because it seemed like the right environment for bacteria and viruses to survive. Her mental state was questionable, and she had old cassette players and VHS players all over the place, which don't really exist anymore. When I asked her why she lived like this, all that she could tell me was that as long as filth smelled like the way it should, it was all good. Everything was a mess, and I don't know why, but it kind of all got me being grateful for all the things I had in my life. On the other hand, I am sure someone with OCD would love to clean every speck of this place, and with everything out of order, it told me that her life must have been out of control. Things were broken, and she survived on government benefits and some inheritance from her parents. I could hear small things moving around, and they must have been rats or some other animal. It's weird how animals can survive in such mess. I guess their immune system must be better than ours. Actually, maybe this woman's immune system might be amazing at this point because she has survived this long in this mess. She told me about her mother and father. She was brought up in a 5-bedroom house. She also had 2 younger siblings, and after she had told me that she had siblings, I quickly assumed that her siblings had wanted nothing to do with her, which I was gravely wrong about. I tried asking more questions about her upbringing, but all she told me was, just go to the house of my childhood and notice how the filth gives off an amazing aroma. I then went to her childhood home, and I could clearly see that it had been abandoned for many years, and Mother Nature had clearly took over the house. It's sad how houses begin to go under after they had been abandoned, and it reminded me of the only thing I had remembered in my sociology class before I changed courses to journalism. It's people that give meaning to buildings and materialistic things, not the object itself. I kicked the door down as I could clearly see that the front door was past its prime. From what the house looked like, I had expected odour and stench to hit my nose, but instead I got to smell the most amazing aroma I had ever smelt in my life. I then started searching her childhood home for anything interesting to find. This woman's childhood home was exactly like her own house, and I don't know why, but I started to become irritated by this woman. In my generation, we are finding it difficult to even buy a home, and even if someone from my generation has managed to somehow buy a home, it's hard to keep it maintained. Yet this woman has managed to live in a big childhood home as well as having her own home, which clearly she had decided to neglect it. It's unfair, but I guess life is just unfair. It was all a mess, and I was beginning to find it all predictable with the neglect of having any care or pride in one's own life. Maybe her parents were abusive, and I wondered more about her siblings, because now I wanted to know why she was so alone in the world. We all need someone, no matter who we are, but then again, loneliness is a big problem in Western civilization, and we even have someone in the government whose main job is to tackle things like loneliness. Loneliness becomes more apparent as we get older, and this woman was old now, and with the inventions of social media and computer games, it's made loneliness even more stronger. The only good but odd thing about this woman's childhood home is the nice aroma and smell. I decided to follow the aroma because I couldn't resist it anymore. The aroma could be smelt the most from behind the sofas, and you know how in cartoons, when one cartoon character follows a pack of sweets, all lined up because it was being set up? That's what happened to me. When I looked behind the sofas, I gasped with horror and with utter disbelief, because I never thought that I would ever look upon something so disgusting and completely random. I saw 4 skeleton bones, still giving off a perfume-like scent. And this is not the type of smell you would think death could give off. I mean, with an amazing smell present, you would think something was full of life to give such a scent. I went back to see the woman, and I didn't call the police just yet because I wanted to know more, and I wanted her permission first of how to proceed with everything that I had just found. When I told this woman of Filth, of what I had experienced in her childhood home, she started tearing up. Instead of calling the police, she just turned on the VHS player, and I started to watch something. Like an explanation video. At the same time, I also have to shamefully admit, finding all of this would have progressed my career in the journalism world. Even though I had just found something terrible, my career coming to my mind showed how I could have profited from this. Anyhow, the video told me more things about what was really going on. Hello. My name is Dr. Rogerson Peake. I have invented a pill that could make any dead person smell nice. When a body starts decomposing, it usually starts to smell. But with this pill, a decomposing body will be the most sweet-smelling thing you have ever smelt. The cassette player kept on playing. After watching the whole video, a few thoughts came to mind. Yes, the pill would give the dead person a bit more dignity by smelling nice, and it will also help people who deal with dead bodies, like in hospitals. But at the same time, this might be a great advantage for a murderer or serial killer. Imagine someone had murdered someone in your home, but the murdered person had this pill before being murdered. It could be some time before you notice something is off. Something smelling nice usually doesn't give an image of death or tell you that something is decomposing. It's always the nasty smell which makes us think something is off. Like when I was in this woman's childhood home, I honestly didn't think I would find something to be dead. Do you see how this might be an advantage for a serial killer or murderer? And I started to understand why this woman lived like the way she lived now for such a long time. I felt bad for being so judgmental or for thinking about my career gain of this whole story. I also started to glue together who those skeletons belonged to. From common sense, those skeletons behind the sofa in her childhood home must have been her 2 parents and 2 siblings. And I thought they had just abandoned her because of the way she had lived her life. "Is someone trying to kill you?" I asked this woman. My whole family took part in the experiment to eat the pill. We were struggling for money at the time, and they promised us that they would pay us lots of money to eat the pill. They weren't 100% honest with us, and none of us knew what the pill was made for exactly, she told me. She started crying a little bit, and the more I understood her story and why she lived the way she did, it was sad, just so sad. How we humans can be so unsympathetic or not care enough to understand someone but rather to judge and cast aside. After taking the pill, one midnight someone broke into my home, and I was just a child back then, and this man had murdered my mother, father, and both my siblings. I hid in a secret wall cupboard in my room, which my father had built. For weeks this strange man who broke into my house observed my whole family's dead bodies. They all started to smell nice as they decomposed. I overheard his talk on the phone, and they wanted to use this pill in war and other scenarios where death is common, but they wanted to hide the deaths and murders. If something smells nice, no one would ever think something has died, she explained to me. She managed to escape when the strange man went for a smoke in her garden, and I couldn't believe what I had just been told. This story was not just a story, but probably one of the biggest scandals in the 21st century. I had to write about this and get this story out, and I phoned the police about the 4 skeletons in this woman's childhood home. Something had to be done, and we all know how shady the government can be and some of the things they can be capable of. This woman deserved justice. I hugged her and she pleaded me not to go to the police, but obviously I decided to go against her. I went back to my flat, and as soon as I entered, a beautiful scented aroma hit my nose. But I never sprayed anything inside my flat recently. I checked my whole flat and I found a dead body in my bathtub. The dead body had a note attached to it, which read, "Be wary of your steps, lad." I straight away drove to the woman's house, and this time, instead of the scent of filth hitting my nose, it was a perfume-like aroma, and I knew she had been murdered in her own living room. There was a note on her body which read, "We are watching, and the dead body in your flat has been taken now." And I couldn't believe it. I checked her childhood home, and everything inside had been taken, and no sign of police of any kind. They knew I would check on this woman after finding a dead body in her apartment, as well as her childhood home. I am being watched now. Me and my friends were looking for something fun to do during the summer holidays. One of my friends had an idea. There was a woman living down a lonely lane about a mile from where we lived. Word around town was she was a witch. That's all we were told. She was a witch and to stay away from her house, even her lane. We were feeling very adventurous, and even as dangerous as the idea sounded, we welcomed it, due to the sheer fact of how dangerous and exciting it might be. We were just outside her gate when we noticed how creepy her house was. I guessed no wonder it was creepy if she is meant to be some kind of witch. We climbed over the wall and into her garden and noticed a beautiful big apple tree with bright red apples all over it. My friend had a bag with her, so we started picking apples off the ground and put them in the bag. We all jumped when we heard a woman's voice behind us. It was her, the witch that everyone was speaking about. I knew because I was shown a photo of her before. I said, "I'm so sorry, miss. We didn't realise this was private property." The woman looked at us and spoke. "Nonsense, my dear. Why pick up those windfalls from the ground? Why don't ye climb up the tree and pick the big bright red ones, and when ye are finished, why don't ye just come in and I'll give ye a nice soda?" We were so relieved that the woman wasn't mad and she actually seemed really nice. We climbed the tree and picked about a dozen or more apples, then knocked at the woman's door. She opened it and there was a lovely smell of apple tart coming from her oven. She said, "I just made a lovely apple tart for ye. Sit down and make yourselves comfortable and I'll get ye some tart and some soda." We all sat down and 2 minutes later the lady brought us a slice of apple tart and some soda. My friends started drinking the soda and eating the apple tart. I didn't feel like drinking or eating, but I pretended to, as I didn't want to insult the lady for her being so nice. I felt awful knowing the rumours about her being a witch when she was such a sweet old lady. A few minutes later, I saw my friends act really strange, as if they felt drowsy and wondered what was happening. I walked over to the door, but as I did, I could see the woman standing looking at me with what looked like a big black cauldron that witches have in movies. I could see a bottle of poison on top of the sink. I realised then she had poisoned my friends. I tried to scream, but no scream came out as I was so much frozen in fear. Then she spoke in a creepy voice, looking me right in the eye, and said, "Witchcraft." It was a beautiful summer's day, and me and my friend decided to visit a local castle called Ballet Castle. We walked for miles to see it, and it was all worth it when we saw what such a beautiful castle it was. Me and my friend were walking around the countryside when we discovered a beautiful white horse painted up on the side of a cliff. We didn't climb up to see it up close, as it was pretty steep and we didn't have the energy to go climbing up anyway. We got a start when someone suddenly came out of the bushes. It was a man holding a bucket of white paint. I told him it was a beautiful idea. "Oh yes, it looks beautiful maybe, but there's a sad story behind it." I asked him, what was it? And he began to tell us the story about the white horse. Years and years ago, there was a beautiful farmer's daughter who fell deeply in love with a local farmer's son. They used to love being in each other's company and wander through the hills holding each other's hand. The girl used to ride a white horse that used to shine bright against the sun on a lovely summer's day. The boy and girl knew that what they had together was true love, so she told her father they wanted to get married. Her father lost his temper instantly and shouted in a rage. No way was she going to marry that boy, and she would marry a man of his choice. There was a huge argument between herself and her father over it, so she ran out crying and jumped on her horse and went riding through the woods. The girl was screaming for her life as the white horse bolted over the edge of the cliff, with both daughter and horse falling to their deaths. The white horse was painted on the cliff to mark this fateful day. I told the man what a sad story. Suddenly, me and my friend heard a horse behind us galloping, and when we looked back to the man, he was gone.
Of all the money that e'er I spent it in good company, and of all